All right, that handsome fellow over there, if you're watching on YouTube or on my website, is Zach Parker, and he's been recommended by Ian Harfield, who was on the show a little while back. Zach, welcome, man. Thanks for joining our podcast. How are you?
Thanks for having me. I'm doing great.
That's good.
Appreciate
Okay. Look, it's my pleasure. I've been looking forward to having you on. And I want to dive in because this is a fascinating topic. And I spent some time on your website reading about the optimal training environments and having player-centric learning and stuff like that. So this is good stuff for our listeners. But our listeners also might not be completely familiar with you because some of them live abroad. So tell us a little bit about you and how you came to where you are, please.
I've just been a guy that's been lucky to be around players that were passionate to get better, and I had the opportunity to guide them along the way. I've started out my journey in golf coaching in the private club sector outside New York City and Connecticut, and had an amazing boss who gave me a platform to just make mistakes and learn and grow. And in that time, I realized that I really wanted to help players that were really passionate about getting better. Not to say that I don't enjoy coaching the average golfer. I just really enjoy having the opportunity to coach someone in a long-term athletic development program.
Yeah.
So at that time, I sought out an opportunity to try and be in this elite junior space. And actually, one of your fellow countrymen gave me a chance about 12 years ago, which was Gary Gilchrist.
Yeah.
And Gary's an amazing guy and allowed me to work alongside him and run a junior golf academy. And in that time, I've grown and I've learned and I've made mistakes. And since then, I've run another junior golf academy, and now I base myself at the Ledbetter World Headquarters here in Orlando. And we not only coach tour players and elite juniors, but we also have a junior academy as well.
Yeah. Well, look, Led is kind of the stem and we're all the branches, right? I mean, he's been a mentor to me many, many times throughout my career too. But before I dive into this, you talk about the junior elite academies and such like that. But for just your regular golfer, let's call him the 51-year-old guy that sort of resembles Mark Immelman, who's doing the question asking and commenting here. They're like, okay, juniors, and they want to switch off. But the truth is, learning is the same whether you're a junior, elite, beginner, adult, elite, beginner, club golfer, whatever the case might be. Am I right in my assumption?
There's no doubt. I think, Mark, the way that I apply the learning sciences and what I know about coaching, it just doesn't stop at coaching golf. I do that when I parent my daughter. I do that when I'm learning a new skill myself. So I don't think that when someone hears, oh, this guy coaches elite juniors or tour professionals, that they can't listen. If anything, I think the average golfer can benefit more from the fundamentals, if you will, of how to practice more so than an elite junior or a tour professional. Because some of those skills are already innate to someone that's making that their passion or their livelihood. Whereas the golfer that practices twice a week, or maybe even only once a week, could benefit so much from getting more return on that investment of time.
I'm so glad you say that because, I'm a teacher. I gave a few lessons this morning. I'm more part-time now than anything else. But one of the first questions you'll ask a client is, okay, who are you? Tell us about you, strengths, weaknesses, and you give the assessment, if you will, right? And then there's always the question, well, what are the goals? And then once they've told you the goals, and you're like, well, okay, tell us about your habits. How much do you practice? And for a lot of folks, practice is going to the range with a bucket of balls, whacking them away, essentially just getting some cardiovascular exercise for a while and not necessarily improving. Am I sort of speaking where you're going here?
For sure. I think what most people do is they do a math problem. So if I asked you what 17 times 3 is, you could give me the answer in no time. But if I asked you that same math problem 10 times in a row, you would start to think I'm crazy. Yeah, that's how every single golfer practices. They work on a movement, they hit a good shot or they hit a bad shot, and they continue to just do the same thing over and over again. And it's not to their detriment because they obviously are getting a benefit, like you said, of cardiovascular, or maybe they're even seeing some decent shots. So they're getting this false sense of competency. But if someone really wants to train and learn, they're obviously trying to change a movement pattern or
Yeah.
a motor program.
Mhm.
And you can't change a motor program or a movement pattern just doing the same thing over and over again. It just doesn't last. And that's not me saying that, that's people with way more letters behind their last name than I have.
Well, one of the things, the topic of the conversation you pitched to me, which I loved, is understanding how to create an optimal training environment. Okay, so that's the overarching subject. But then you quickly followed that with the power of adding adversity and using circuits to help athletes train and retain their learning. And I love the train and retain thing, because the one thing I always wish that my clients would say to me when they come back, because I'll ask them, I'm like, so tell me what you learned the last time. And that's not to remind me, that's to see how they retain the information, and how they've built on that and discovered, once they went down their little avenue, whatever it was.
For sure. I think most athletes don't take the time to plan what they're going to do. They certainly don't
Yeah.
take the time to reflect what they did. So in our sport, right, par is a good score. Imagine if every person thought about their practice as planning, acting, and reflecting. And I don't think people take enough time to sit down at the end of their session and think about what did they learn, why did it work. And I definitely know that they're not doing that in the context of the training, whether that's 30 minutes, an hour, 2 hours. They're definitely not stopping and thinking, what was I trying to do on that shot? What did I actually do? And what can I learn from either that success or failure?
So it's continual learning then, and I would call it just awareness of self too. It's not just like you say, just hitting balls for 30 minutes and leaving their incident essentially the same person.
For sure. And I think if we ask the average golfer what they do when they go to the range, right? They
Yeah.
probably do one or two simple little stretches that are just a
If they
placeholder of time.
if they
And
stretch.
then they clip a few pitching wedges, and then they hit 7-iron off of a flat lie for about an hour. And then maybe they hit a couple drivers and they leave. But when we're on
It's
the
like my practice session the other day.
eh,
I'm making a comeback. That's exactly what I did. The stretches were cursory, big guy. I didn't even challenge myself. I sort of tilted one way or the other. And you're right,
yeah.
wedges, and then a few. Actually, mine's were 8-irons because I've always been good with the 8-iron. And then I hit a few drivers to close it, and then I left. That's exactly
And
what I.
if you think about a round of golf, Mark, you maybe hit 3 7-irons in a round of golf.
Yeah.
So why are we practicing our sport in a way that we're actually never going to use in the context of a tournament or a social round or a club championship round or a major championship, depending on the level of player you're talking to? But too often, the way that they're practicing has no context to what they're actually going to do when they're trying to perform.
So you're essentially speaking to the listener and or viewer of this podcast and saying, what I'm going to advise you is going to make taking your work to the course and having it become fruitful out there, instead of just hitting and then going to the course and wondering why you haven't got any better.
100%. And I think too, the average club member or recreational golfer or elite player forget that they can actually train and practice when they're on the golf course. We're one of the only sports in the world that have this separate area where we practice and then we go and play in a different environment. It's if I was to be an NBA basketball coach, I wouldn't take my guys to the local corner and play pickup basketball on asphalt and then ask them to play a competition inside of a gym. I would train them in the gym. So there's a breakdown in our entire sport of how people are practicing for sure.
All right, I'm bouncing around the place, so do forgive me. But when you were saying that, it reminded me of a comment that I read on your site that I really enjoyed. And it was essentially speaking about a learner, and I have one in my household now. She's about to turn 15, learning to drive a car. And you would like, and the point you made, which was so well founded, and I thought about it going, geez, that makes a lot of sense. You were like, the learner driver wouldn't be sitting in the passenger seat. The learner driver sits behind the steering wheel and the instructor is in the passenger seat. So I want you to embellish on that, because I see so many lessons, or, friends helping friends out there on the range, whether they're helping them into oblivion or actual success, where there's a whole lot of demonstration and then the poor students just standing there nodding and stuff's going over their head and they still remain the same.
For sure. And I think to give the example of driving, right? At some point, your daughter watched you drive, right? Just because of her age, and she sat in the back seat for a while. And then when she was old enough, she sat in the front seat. And then when she was starting to get to that age where you thought, hey, at some point, she's going to sit in the driver's seat, you probably talked to her about what you were doing and why you were doing it. The reality is she listened, but she learned very little until she sat behind the wheel and you were to her right and saying to her, don't do this, don't do that. Oh my God, do you see this car? Do you see that? You got to stop. And in that chaos and in that stress, that's when your daughter actually learned how to brake, how to accelerate, how to look to the right, how to look to the left, how to use her rear view mirror, because she was forced to because of the environment. It's not that
the adversity, as you were referencing.
For sure. I mean, we all learn how to drive, and then driving in snow is completely different. But you can't teach someone how to drive in snow in Florida. You have to teach someone how to drive in snow when they're actually in snow. So I think coaches or that person on the range who keeps us in business, right? Because they're telling their friends nonsense. They're just trying to apply what they think they know, but they're never asking the question, what do you feel? What are you thinking about?
Yeah.
Where's your focus? And obviously, I wouldn't have this opportunity to be on this podcast if it wasn't for Ian Highfield. So the way Ian breaks it down is a simple equation, right? Your thoughts and feelings have to match your intention. And in practice, what is your intention? And then do your thoughts and feelings match that? Because if your intention is to get better, you wouldn't do the same thing over and over again. You would see, can you learn it? Then can you go and do something else? And can you come back to it and still do it? Because in golf, if you want to be a great driver of the golf ball, you only get to hit 14 of those. And hopefully there's never 2 in a row. So to become a really good driver of the golf ball, you need to be able to hit a good drive, and then almost 35 minutes, sometimes, maybe 45 minutes later, you take that head cover off again. And do you still have the ability to access that movement pattern, be able to allow your thoughts and feelings to match your intention? And that's what your daughter's doing when she's driving. She's getting in the car and she's saying, Dad, I promise I'm going to be safe. I'm going to drive amazing. And then all of a sudden, adversity hits. And does she have the ability to handle or inoculate that stress response and drive as if there was no trouble, as if she was the only car on the road?
And the one guarantee with golf, no matter what your skill station is that trouble, adversity will show up as soon as you get out on the golf course in any sort of an environment.
Yeah, and I hope that everyone listening or watching this understands that when adversity presents itself, it's an opportunity. It's an opportunity to showcase your skills. It's an opportunity to step up in that moment. And if you're afraid of failing or you're afraid of adversity, golf is probably not the best sport, right? Because the architects they're designing golf courses specifically to give you problems and then force you to be a problem solver, whether that's a putt that has incredible break or that's a tee shot that has contextual interference off of the tee. You have to learn how to block out the noise and focus on what you need to focus on.
All right, this is awesome, and I'm everywhere. I'm trying to gather myself and get back to, well, not get on script because I love the conversation. But now we've basically put this into context from a cerebral point of view for the fan, for the listener or viewer. Let's make it practical now, because I loved your take. You're like, okay, if you want to be a great driver, you only hit your driver once every 20 minutes or whatever the case might be. And then you have to be able to reaccess those skills and stuff and be current and do the right thing, even though You might have hit a few irons or whatever it was, obviously a few putts between shots. So how do we create this environment in practice? Advise the people to go, okay, you want to make practice really purpose driven and beneficial. This is how you should go about things.
Yeah. So at the foundation of what I believe, Mark, is that if you want to learn a skill, you shouldn't be put into the position. You should be pulled out of the position. So if you're someone who typically takes the golf club to the inside, maybe your instructor would attach a band to the end of the golf club, and it would be pulling, he or she would be pulling the golf club farther to the inside. So you actually had to do the work to fight against your flawed pattern. So a lot of the stuff that I would do is like Pnf training or pulling a player out of position to force them to learn. And obviously I understand that that can have a benefit because the conversations we have after, right? So let's say that player is excessively pulling the club to the inside, then I tie the band around their club and I pull it farther to the inside, and they have to recruit a movement pattern or some muscles to stop me from pulling it. Mm-hmm. After 2 or 3 reps, I would say to them, what did you just do to stop that? And the way that they're going to start to explain it is not going to be in my words, it's going to be in their words. And then those are the things that we start to talk about, because I don't ever want a player to leave a session with me and sound like Zach Parker. Yeah. I want a player to leave sounding like the voice in their head when they're standing on the 18th hole trying to beat their buddies for a beer at the club.
Hey, just in the interests of understanding, you talked about Pnf training or Pnf training. What does the acronym stand for? I'd like to embellish that for the listener, please.
So that's proprioceptive neuromuscular facilitation. So it's basically forcing the athlete to have to fight against the resistance. So a lot of this stuff was done in stretching or in movement patterns. And I think what makes me unique, Mark, is that I didn't learn how to coach golf from a bunch of golf coaches. I learned how to coach golf from trying to take things from other sports, trying to take things from movement specialists or people that were exceptional at teaching people how to learn a skill, whether that was playing the violin or it was serving a tennis shot or it was playing golf. I think there's so much out there that we're missing in golf. And so I tried to do that. And Pnf is something that I found allows an athlete to feel, and then they're able to articulate what they feel. And once a player is able to articulate what they feel versus me telling them what to feel, we now have something to build on. Because that would be, if I tell an athlete, hey, you know what? I just want you to feel like you move your arms and then your torso follows your arms. They're looking at me like your daughter was looking at you when you were driving the car trying to teach her how to drive.
Yeah.
But as soon as you put your daughter in the car and she was like, you know what, Dad, when I feel like I'm coming to this red light, I have no idea when I should start braking. When do you think I should start braking? And now her brain is open to you actually helping her learn instead of just you fire hosing her with a bunch of information and she's not even listening. Yeah. And that's kind of the crux of what I believe.
Well, look, it's so well founded and it's almost too sensible, the way you talk about it, because I love the way you make the concept cerebral, but then you turn it into a feel as well, the proprioception of it all, because their habits to me are reliable, good and or bad. You know, if you've got a bad habit, doesn't matter how much you think positive and sing kumbaya, unless you've trained your body differently, that habit's likely to show up under pressure.
There is no doubt that if you have a movement pattern and you think that you're going to change it by hitting balls for an hour on the range, mm-hmm. you've never read any scientific research on how to change a movement pattern, right? Like, yeah. You have to understand the way that the brain works, and the way that you train isn't to just do a drill and expect that drill is going to change your golf swing. The reason why people should do drills should be to allow them to become aware of what they're trying to feel. And then they should try and actually be pulled farther into their flawed pattern So they have to do that feel more. And then as soon as that coach or environment is taken away, can they still access that feel? So for you, if you're trying to hit a fade and you stand up on a hole that Jack Nicklaus designed, maybe it's very easy to see fade because the hole is shaped for a fader. But what if you stand up on a hole like, let's say number 10 at Augusta, and you're like, well, I want to fade it, but I don't want to end up in the cabins, right? So how am I going to turn this thing over? A lot of athletes don't have the ability to access those feels because they've just been words or thoughts. And I believe a coach's job, or ultimately not even a coach's job, but a player that's trying to get better's job should be, when they go to practice, that they can transfer their thoughts into feelings. And if they can then have those feelings put under pressure and they're able to stay with those feelings in the face of adversity, I think they have a feel or a process to hitting a golf shot that's going to hold up under stress.
I have two follow-ups there. First, you hit me with the adversity thing, and that is such a big deal. So I want to go there first. You know, panic and tension and what ifs and all that sort of stuff are, they round and player ruiners. I don't care who you are. And it happens so quickly. And then when the panic sets in, you can actually watch this poor golfer floundering around the place, and they're trying to do all the right thing, but there's just nothing going on. And then they play themselves into a mire, and all of a sudden, when stuff's bad enough, then they switch off, and then they hit a few good shots, then they rectify. And then the answer is, well, if only I could have done that 5 holes ago, I would have been fine. I want you to live there, because the addition of adversity is real. And I don't think golfers recognize that enough when they're out there competing, and perhaps, to a certain extent, even practicing.
Yeah, I think it's a tough thing for a coach or someone that's going to spend time on the range to say, hey, I'm going to take the next hour and watch you struggle to help you learn, versus like if someone's coming to me and paying my hourly rate and I said to them, hey, I want you to think how good I am, how smart I am, I'm going to make that environment super easy. And I'm going to make them think, wow, he gave me this one feel or this one swing tip, if you will. And all of a sudden I was ready to play.
Yeah.
That's not who I am. What I want is, I want the athlete to understand that I'm comfortable enough in the information that I'm delivering or the concepts that they are training, that they're going to look horrible in practice. They're going to struggle. They're going to get frustrated. And then there's going to be this moment where they lean into the concepts that we've talked about. They lean into that voice in their head that's saying, hey, you know what I need to do? I need to feel this muscle, or I need to drive this movement. And then when they hit that shot, they can be proud of themselves because they were able to coach themselves.
Mm-hmm.
My job's not to make a player need me all the time. I think my job is actually to help an athlete learn how to coach themselves.
Yeah, absolutely. And I guess that sort of begged my follow-up. So you led me right there. Look, unless they're going to Zach Parker for a lesson, or you're Ian deals with the mental side of things a bit more. How does one do this by oneself? Like, let's say, for argument's sake, let's make it easy. I've identified my swing flaw, let's say, and then I sort of know where the error is. So I try and make that mistake a whole lot more, so I'm aware of it, and then that gives me the boundary to sort of work within. So I'm, getting some feedback and knowing that I'm going feel wise in the right direction. Are you getting where I'm going here?
100%. So if you watch one of my players or one of the players that I have the privilege of coaching Ian with, one of the key standouts should be that they take 5 balls out of the pyramid or out of a den caddy, and they place them in like a nice little organized pattern, and they're going to have 5 balls. And in those 5 balls, they're not going to do the same thing ever. They're going to, let's say it's you and you're trying to learn how to have a little bit more lateral shift with your pelvis in the transition, right? For your listener, instead of getting all crazy and talking about things that we could have fun with, but let's just say they're trying to shift their pressure more to the left through the shot, right? what I would like to see that athlete have is attach a band around them that's pulling them away from the target. So they're having to fight against that band and they're having to work twice as hard to get into that left side. So they would hit one shot being pulled the wrong way and having to fight against it. Then they would come out of that. They would probably hit a chip shot in another direction. Then they would come back. They would get back in that band. They would do that again for the third ball. And then they would get out of that. And for the fourth ball, they would probably actually play a shot down the range with a clear focus and objective. Like, I'm going to hit push fade, starting here, ending here at this yardage. And if they did that, if they did all 4 of those reps correctly, I would say hit driver into a desired window on the range, make an imaginary fairway. And if they hit the fairway, they should walk to the putting green and have to make a 4-foot putt. Now, if they didn't hit the iron shot correctly, but they hit the driver correctly, they should have to make a 6-foot putt on the range. Like, they should have to walk over, make a 6-foot putt. If both shots, the iron shot and the driver, were poor, they should have to make an 8-foot putt.
Or hit a
and they shouldn't be allowed to come back until they've made that putt. And the reason is, I want them to have to understand that when they're training and they walk away, they're still thinking about what they learned. We're all crazy as golfers. And as we're walking to the putting green, whether it's me or my mother-in-law or it's a tour player, they're still thinking about maybe even the first ball with the band, or they're thinking about the third ball with the band, or they're thinking about the driver, and they're feeling something. So then it's their job on the putting green to quiet their mind and think about the objective at hand, make the putt, and then they would come back and they would do that same 5-ball circuit again. What I know is that when they get to that first band again, they are going to have the ability to know what to do and how to shift better than if they had just done 50 bands in a row. Because the adding spacing, let's just call it time for your listeners, forces someone to have to recall those thoughts, recall those feelings. And when we're able to do that, you're now actually training how to play. If I hit an amazing pitch shot on the first hole, it might be the 10th hole that I get to hit another pitch shot.
Yeah.
But if I have an amazing caddy, he's going to say to me, hey, Zach, you know what? This is the exact number we had on number 1. We have a little bit of more wind into us. So let's flight this a little bit lower and know that it's going to check. That conversation now allows me to go back in my mind and remember what I did on number 1. And now imagery is driving movement and I can hit the shot.
Yeah.
And that sounds like a lot maybe for your listeners, but that is literally how your brain works. Your brain is constantly thinking about how to create the path of least resistance. And if you train it just to rep balls, you're going to be that guy on the course after they hit one shot that just quickly reaches into their pocket and the second ball's out before you even know it. Because that's the habit you've created while you're practicing.
Yeah, true.
If you're one of our athletes, hopefully the habit that you have after you hit a shot is you're reflecting and you're thinking and you're coaching yourself out of it. So the next time that situation or an opportunity presents itself, you know how to coach yourself into the shot.
I need to address the shadow side of this, because I'm listening to you and going, this is genius and everyone should be doing this. But what I know, I'm thinking of my home club over here, right? So you have the practice hitting area, and then, I don't know, 20, 30 yards that way is the chipping area, and the putting green's another 30, 40 yards this way. So I do my one deal on the range, and then I hit another shot. Then to walk up the hill to the putting green, it's hard work because you're up and down stairs and stuff like that. I can see golfers going, well, dang, Zach sounds awesome, but I'm going to look like a nutcase to my friends. So let's talk about the discipline of actually doing this, because it sounds to me like it's going to take a whole lot to really be in that mindset for an extended period of time.
Yeah, and I guess you can modify it depending on the amount you want to learn. If you want to learn the most, I'm telling you that this is definitely the best way. If you say, hey, you know what, I want to get 50% out of it, and I'm only willing to walk to 30 yards and then come back, that's fine too. And obviously at our facility, just like yours, there's a little bit of a walk.
Yeah.
And when I do this with an athlete for the first time, I know when they're walking the first time, they think I'm nuts. They think I'm nuts.
Yeah.
But what I know is that that walk allows them to reflect, and it forces them to think about it. Now, I can't tell you that player A, B, or C is going to be willing to do this, but I will promise them that if they do it, they're going to get more out of the next set of balls. Just hitting 50 balls is a waste of time. Your brain stops learning after somewhere around probably 4 or 5 balls. So walking and then walking back
as a reset
is a better use of your time than not walking and wasting your time hitting another 45 balls.
I got to share this at the PGA Championship earlier this year, Southern Hills. This is 2022 for folks who are listening to this down the way. I'm out there on the range prior to the event doing my pre-tournament reconnaissance before the broadcast, and Bryson's there. And Bryson had been out with a hand injury for a bit. So I ask him about it, and he shows me his hand, and you can see the scar there from the surgery and stuff. So in the next hole, and he's hitting shots around the green, you can see he's a little off there. But the next hole's a par 3, the 11th hole, and he hits this beautiful sort of flighted wedge into the wind to wherever. And I'm like, man, that looked like yesterday. And he said, you know what? In my time off, it gave me a lot of time just to sit in the chair and think about what I was trying to do with my golf swing. And I almost feel like I've come out better because of that.
Yeah, I mean, there's so many things about Bryson that to the average person seem a little bit crazy. Okay, but there's a small amount of genius in there, right? In the sense that he's saying that he was learning while sitting in the chair.
Yeah.
He wasn't on his phone watching his golf swing over and over again. I'm sure at some points he was looking at his swing. I'm sure at some points he was talking to Chris and saying, hey, what are we trying to do? Where are we trying to go? And then he was probably also spending time recalling the amazing shots that he hit. The brain's an amazing thing. If I said to you right now, imagine you're in your bedroom, you could quickly start to see the color of the walls. You could see things.
Yeah.
Because you have the ability to recall. Yet the average golfer, the only thing they're recalling are their bad shots. Because when they're practicing, they're only putting emotion towards the negative. They're never putting emotion towards the positive. And when you practice in this way, where you limit the amount of balls you get, what you're doing is you're forcing yourself to have to reflect and value the ball that's in front of you. Good or bad, you can learn from any situation. And I think what Bryson was talking about is he took adversity and he used it to his benefit. And that's really the whole theme of what we're talking about here. If you hit a shot and it's in the trees and now you have to play a low punch fade, instead of being frustrated, think, oh, wow, this is an opportunity for me. If you're that guy that needed to shift his pressure more to the left, well, now you have an environment that forces you to. So now the way that you missed a shot could actually help you hit the next tee shot better. It's just about how you reframe it.
Okay. I don't know if this is a worthwhile comparison or an anecdote, but I want to share it and I want your take. It was with a lesson I gave this morning. This guy is a really good player. He's won numerous amateur events throughout his career. Now he's a little older. I would say he's late 50, sort of lost some of the ball striking skill, lost some power, missing irons a bunch. And he's gone to see a bunch of instructors. And he comes to me and he goes, hitting it crappy, tired of this shit, etc. And so I look at him and I can see where the issue is. And I've worked with him before, but also know he's the kind of guy that's going to take something, go work on it for a bit. And then when it goes wrong, he's just going to ditch it. It's like, I'm going to check it. So I actually used the launch monitor and I put him on it. And I showed him, because I said to him, what are you trying to hit? He goes, I'm hitting this weak fade that stands up right now. And I'm like, so what is your shot you want to go to? And he said, a draw. So that gave me the mandate to say, to show him what I did. So I put him on the launch monitor, and the launch monitor essentially showed that his swing path was like 1 degree to the right. I mean, it was basically straight.
Mm-hmm.
And I explained to him, I'm like, you realize if you want to draw the golf ball, how little you can close that club face in relation to the path without that ball going left.
Hmm.
So the more you're playing react and don't miss it left, because that's what he's scared of, the more you weaken the face and the thing stands up and cuts away from you. So I had him aiming way right, trying to swing hard draws at the target. As he did this, the ball flight got tighter, higher, faster. And he looked at me and he goes, so what the hell? And I basically go, you have the mandate now to be able to square the club face more, power up the shots, and there's no sort of fear of failure. Is that sort of what you're saying too? Because I love what you're saying is like you hit a drive, then you go and hit a putt and stuff like that, and you're never basking in all the mishits and stuff that are normally swimming around in our brains.
Yeah, I mean, I think the chemical that we're trying to release inside of our athletes is dopamine, right? And people are addicted to their cell phones right now. My job is to make people addicted to practice. And there's a million kids today that are addicted to playing video games on their phone. And why are they addicted to playing video games on their phone? Because it's not the same level or the same world or whatever. I don't know anything about video games, but there's something different every time.
Yeah.
And what's fun is when a situation presents itself and you have to step up and you step up. So the situation of these 5 balls and then go make a putt. Whenever one of my athletes makes that putt, they're in essence feeling proud of themselves, and they're getting to then go and earn the right to work on what they want to work on. And when they miss and they have to hit another putt to a different hole from a different location, they're then having to work on a skill of being able to handle stress. And they might be on the putting green for 2 or 3 reps. But when they finally make that ball and they get to take that walk, say it's at your club, back down those stairs to the range, they're proud of themselves when they're walking back.
Yeah, exactly.
And I guess my question to your listeners would be, when you're practicing, how are you trying to create habits that are going to allow you to feel proud of what you did in that time? And too often it's, oh, I'm going to hit balls. And when I hit a good one, I club twirl, and then I just rake over another one. And I have no time to actually be proud of what I did. So adversity is an opportunity to either step up or to be the chump, if you will. And when you actually step up, it feels good and you become addicted to stepping up. I just don't think enough people listening to this podcast are training to have that step up moment in practice.
No, of course they're not. If people were honest with themselves, and you can tweet us, tweet Zach, tweet me, raise your hand if you are, and I would venture a guess that nobody would. Hey, I want to ask you this, because the anecdote you drew was where it was a physical element we were trying to develop. We were talking about moving some forward pressure into the front foot. What if it's just as simple as shot shaping? So you got driver in hand, you want to hit yourself a high draw, and you set up, you do all the right stuff, you make your swing, and you don't pull it off. Then you walk up the putting green and you go and, or then you hit your iron or whatever it is. Then you go to the putting green. So you're sort of playing around with the whole thing and you're recovering from the miss with the shot shape. Do you understand where I'm going there?
Yeah, I think if you tried to play push draw, like that concept that you were teaching your athlete, and you didn't get to do it and you have to walk to the putting green, the question that you're saying to, I guess I would have for that athlete is, are you walking to the putting green telling yourself how bad you are and how you can't believe that you didn't do it? Or are you walking there saying, how am I going to do this the next time so I don't have to do this walk again to the chipping green and I can just go make a 4-foot putt? And that there's just not enough time spent on coaching yourself after a bad shot. People want to put all this emotion and anchor these poor shots, but they never take the time to think about how they coach themselves out of it. So if I was trying to teach you how to hit that draw, obviously we'd put an alignment rod out in the range and you'd have to shape it around. Or if it's an athlete that has the opportunity to use TrackMan or a GC quad or something like that. You can quantify it based on the radar.
Yeah.
But what is the objective, right? In that situation, is the player actually visualizing the start line and seeing the end line? Because sometimes players come into the shot and they're trying to play a draw, but they have no idea where they're actually trying to start the ball because they're just raking and hitting, and they're not changing the target. They're not learning how to be engaged with the target while they're looking at the ball. They're so used to just hitting, seeing the shot, going, oh, that didn't draw, let me make some change, instead of really taking the time to figure out the best process and steps for them to hit that draw.
Mm-hmm. Wow. I want to say this is groundbreaking, but it truly is, because I have never, ever seen a golfer practice like this. So I'm keen to come and watch your crowd that you have down there. If you were to give, because I've kept you for such a long time, if you were going to give the listener or the viewer of this marching orders to how to make your practice count and how to learn from adversity, how to not be afraid to put yourself in that position for future growth, what would that be? How would you encapsulate your message to them?
I guess I would say first take the time before you even start to do those 2-3 waste of time exercises. I would say sit down and plan what you want to do. So if you're that athlete that wants to work on pressure, I would say today my objective is to work on learning how to shift earlier in the transition so that I can have my pressure into my left side.
Yeah.
And then I would say plan how you're going to do that. So I'm going to do that off of something simple. For someone could be an uphill lie, right? So now the uphill lie forces that athlete to have to work against
work harder.
Exactly. Work harder, right? Now, obviously, if it was me, I'd love to see that athlete use a band or have the coach or a friend pulling them even harder out of the position.
Mm-hmm.
I would then say, give yourself a number. And if your number can be 5 balls, amazing. And I'm really proud of you. If your number can only be 10 because you want to start slow, then that's great. But after you do a certain number of reps, give yourself a task, whether that's 1, 2, 3 balls, where there's a consequence. If you achieve it, then you have a smaller level of difficulty that you have to achieve. If all 3 shots are bad, the difficulty level goes up. And now someone might say, yeah, but if I can't do these 3, why should the next task be harder? Again, I just want them to remember, we're trying to give you a situation where you feel proud to get to go back and work on what you want to work on. My goal, if that player wants to learn how to shift their pressure, is not to make them be on the putting green the entire session that they have while they're at the range. But when they do get to come back, they're going to value the amount of balls they have. There's going to be a clearer focus.
Mm-hmm.
And I do 100% believe the intensity is going to go up. And I would be willing to bet all your listeners, if they're willing to try this, there's going to be someone at their facility that starts to ask them, what are you doing? You look so crazy.
Mm-hmm.
And then, you know, what's going to happen? There's going to become this environment where, oh, you know what we should do? We should each hit 4 balls and then we'll all play a drive into the fairway. And the best drive has to hit a 3-foot putt. Second best has to hit 6-foot putt. And now you're creating a practice environment in an individual sport where you now are simulating people standing on a tee watching you hit, which is the exact same thing that happens when you play. So I just think there's a way to change the whole environment at golf practice facilities around the world.
Well, people guaranteed to lower their scores, because let's say they don't shift. Again, using the example of shifting your pressure, let's say you don't do it great. You're going to become quite the scorer if you're having to go and knock in a few putts and stuff, because you're touching on all departments of the game instead of just 45 minutes, you know, working on my golf swing there on the range, block practice.
No doubt. And I also think, Mark, what they're going to learn is how not to get on that typical club golfer bogey train. Yeah. They're going to learn how to inoculate the stress response and say, hey, this was just one hole, or this was just one shot. I now know I'm walking to the next hole like I've walked in these ridiculous practice sessions that Zach and Mark suggested I do. And now they're able to see each learning opportunity, or call it each ball,
Yeah.
for that as an opportunity. It's not that it just carries over. It's a new opportunity with every shot.
Yeah, truly is. Oh, I've got to ask this last question and then I'll let you go. What about the day, because there's going to be one where the day is just not productive. Look, the day's going to be productive, but the day's a struggle. I don't pull the move off. I go up there. I'm having to practice putts all the time to knock one in. And after an hour or whatever it's gone, I've essentially only hit like 2 or 3 shots because I've logged the rest of the time putting. What do you say to the individual over there? Me, I love it. I'd love to know what you would say to the person.
I would say, and it's a two-part answer. The first part is, you now realize that shifting your pressure wasn't the only fault that you have. You need to obviously work on your putting too, if you spend that much time on the putting green. But
I love you.
the second thing I would say is, it's okay, because there's going to be days where you don't drive it well and your irons allow you to score.
Yeah.
Or there's going to be days where you absolutely flush your irons and you're not converting putts. You and I know that because we're golfers, but the average listener might think there's going to be this amazing day where a unicorn shows up and gives you a scorecard and you hit every drive good, every iron good, and made every putt. That's not the sport we play. So the days where you struggle on the range and you're making every putt and you're getting to practice on the range, that's amazing. And the days where you really want to practice on the range, but you just can't get off the putting green, that's amazing too. I guess the answer is, if they were more present, they would have got off that putting green. If they were learning from the previous putt and they were coaching themselves in and out of the putts, they wouldn't have spent that amount of time on the putting green.
Okay, quickly, because I'm loving where you are. I'm absolutely loving this. Folks, you've got to do this. Let's say I'm on the putting green and I have the 8-foot or whatever the distance is you picked for the failure, and I miss. I don't hit the same putt. I go and find a different 8-footer, right? Just like the golf course will ask you a different
100%.
So
never the same ever.
Love it, man. Zach, this is great. I feel like I've been all over the show because I'm learning more than anything else, more than the listener here. So I'm sure, with that being said, that the listeners want to find out more from you. So apart from coming to see you for a lesson or 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 more, where can they follow you? Social media, websites, where do they go, please?
Yeah, ZachParkerGolf.com is my website. I'm probably most active on Instagram if people want to reach out there, which is Zach Parker Golf. They can find me on Facebook. They can also be smart enough to go to my website, and then it probably even gives my email address and cell phone, and they can track me down. Just if someone feels moved by what they heard, or better yet, if someone says, you know what, I know why you're wrong, I would love to chat to that person too. And I think this podcast encapsulates what I believe. We've been all over the place, Mark. We haven't stayed on script, as you said earlier.
Yeah.
And guess what? When I listen back to this, or you listen back to this, there's probably way more flow to it than we actually thought, because chaos is good. And if we can learn how to function in chaos, our brain has the ability to probably remember. People listening to this podcast maybe would have liked, hey, Zach, can you start out with your 5 keys, or can you end with your 5 keys? And I can. The easiest way for me to say this is, put yourself in a situation where you're forced to train. It's has to be harder. You have to be pulled out of the position, and you have to struggle. And as soon as you think you figured it out, you need to go to another discipline and then come back to see if you actually remember. Just like our conversation. As soon as we were probably moving and people were like, oh yeah, build on that, we went to something else. And then hopefully for the listeners, we came back and closed it all up.
I hope so too. Man, I appreciate you so much. This has been fantastic. I look forward to folks really growing and learning and becoming productive out of this, because the more I listen to you, the more I just see this game of golf where you have 14 different bats and you hit them in different situations all of the time, and it's never the same thing. And if it was, there's going to be a change in wind or what. It's just continually it's a continual changing environment, and being able to adapt is probably one of the biggest skills that the elite golfers have.
And one that no one is training.
Yeah, no one. Yeah, exactly right. Zach, man, thank you. I appreciate you so very much.
No, I appreciate the time, and hopefully your listeners took something out of this. And I look forward to seeing people text us or send us social media posts of them doing their circuits. And if people want help building those circuits, find a way to reach out to me, and I would be more than happy to add value to whoever is willing to embrace this concept.